Good evening and welcome. My name's Tim Peck and I'm pleased to be bringing you this webinar today on behalf of Phoenix Australia. It's great to have such an interest in the webinar. We've had over 600 people register for tonight's event, which is a fantastic outcome. And we really just want to encourage those people who have taken the time to register to hopefully everyone take something meaningful out of today's session. I'll be your host and moderator or panel moderator for tonight's webinar. Before we begin, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the lands on which we come to you from today. I'm on the land of the Wurundjeri people and who have been and remain the custodians of the land on which I'm situated on, and we welcome each of you from the land in which you're located. We acknowledge that the land on which we meet was the place of age-old ceremony, of celebration, initiation and renewal, and the local Aboriginal peoples have had and continue to have a unique role in the life of these lands. So we're really pleased to have you join us today. It's a great opportunity for us to get members from across a range of the emergency services together to have a discussion around the impact of disasters on emergency service workers in particular. We'll also have, as I'll explain in a moment, one of our experts from Phoenix Australia, Jane Nursey, assisting in the conversation. But Phoenix Australia is Australia's National Centre of Excellence in Post-Traumatic Mental Health. We're an internationally recognised experts in trauma-related mental health and wellbeing. The work that we do builds evidence and translates knowledge into action, such as improved treatment options and greater support for trauma-affected individuals, families and communities. The webinar today is proudly brought to you by Responder Assist. I sit in the role as a Deputy Director of Responder Assist, and a big apology from our Director, Nicole Sadler, who, fortunately for her, is currently overseas enjoying some time with one of her children, which is a great opportunity for her to have a break, but her deep apologies for not being here today. I'd love to say I'm working from home, and as you can see, and I'm such a dedicated employee at Phoenix Australia, or I've even had the Phoenix logo painted on my wall at home, so I can show my loyalty to the brand. I'm sure Joe will be happy with that. Responder Assist, for those of you that aren't aware, it is funded by the state government. It's known as the Centre of Excellence for Emergency Work and Mental Health. Our core objective is to improve mental health outcomes for emergency service workers, and we do that in a number of ways. Firstly, by building awareness and capability of mental health practitioners across Victoria through our specialist network of clinicians who are specifically trained in the nuances of emergency worker culture and the evidence-based treatments, and through research and evaluation, so we know what we're doing is effective. Today, I'll be joined by Rick Nugent, Emergency Management Commissioner from Emergency Management Victoria. He has a wealth of knowledge in this area. And also joining us for the panel conversation, I'll have Jane Nursey, who I mentioned before, Head of Clinical Services at Phoenix Australia. Again, I'll do a formal introduction later, but Jane has a lengthy and deep understanding of this topic. And Trevor Owen will join us from the Country Fire Authority, where he's a Deputy Chief Officer for the Southeast region. And we're really looking forward to that discussion a little bit down the track. A little bit about housekeeping. Ahead of the webinar, we encouraged you to submit questions as you registered. We had over 250 questions to attend to today, and as you can imagine, that covered a very broad range of topics. And one of the keys about today really is that we understand that disasters and emergency service work is a really broad topic, that there are a whole range of particular aspects to disasters, involving community, the other emergency service areas, but other state-based and federally based support services, places like the Salvation Army and the recovery teams and so on, that are all involved in disaster recovery and response. We also have the impact on families and so on. In a 1 hour webinar, we won't have time, obviously, to get across all of those topics. There is a plethora of information available about disasters, particularly on the Phoenix Australia website. We do have a disaster mental health hub that does have other webinars and other resources that you can go and have a look at and refer to, particularly if you're looking for a specific area to focus on. today we really want to focus on the experience of the emergency service worker, understand a little bit about what it's like for them to be involved in these large-scale events when they have to turn out, and what are some of the learnings we can take from previous events that we've been involved in to try and improve outcomes as we move forward. Enough from me. Let's get started, and I'll introduce Rick Nugent. Rick is a skilled emergency management leader with a 35-year career with Victoria Police. On a personal level, I was very fortunate to work with Rick both as a police member and then in my role at the Police Association Victoria. He's held in the highest esteem at Victoria Police, and was a sad loss for them, I'm sure, when he transferred over to his current role. In his role as Deputy Police Commissioner, Rick had provided exceptional leadership in community safety, managing more than 12,000 police members across 330 police stations across Victoria. He's led police operations as the State Police Commander for some of our major emergencies, including the 2022 October floods. I also know he's heavily involved in the what we call the Black Summer bushfires and the COVID-19 pandemic response. Rick, fantastic to have you on today and chatting with us. Firstly, how about we just have a bit of a chat about your current role, if you'd give me a bit of an overview of what your role is at present.
Thanks, Tim. It's great to be here and be part of this webinar, and thanks to Phoenix and all the staff too for what you do around mental health and wellbeing of employees in this field. So I've been in this role now for a couple of months, 2.5 months or thereabouts. The role is a critical leadership role for emergency management in this state, and in particular leading reforms and improvements that are necessary in response to emergencies, in particular the operational field, but also interoperability with other agencies. One of the really critical roles here is my role during an emergency to ensure that the response is effective, control arrangements are in place, and that coordination is occurring across all agencies and other departments and not-for-profit organisations that are involved as well. In particular, for emergencies, ensuring that consequences of emergencies are appropriately managed and that recovery arrangements are in place as well. So a real focus for me is our people. It is how effective we are in keeping the community safe, and then is that sort of ongoing continuous improvement about how we prevent, mitigate, respond and recover from emergencies in the state. So that's sort of in a brief overview, provides a brief overview of that role.
Fantastic. You've obviously been involved in the emergency services and policing for an extended period of time, Rick. The importance of a personal health and wellbeing plan. We talk a lot about the mental health and wellbeing of emergency service workers and the resources available to them. Could you just give me your sort of view on how you manage your own mental health and some advice perhaps along those lines?
Yeah, thanks. I didn't realise early days how important actually having a plan is. I wish I did. So we, like all emergency service workers, you experience a lot, you see a lot. It does impact. Sometimes single incidents can impact more, sometimes cumulative impacts from events. I developed a plan probably about 20 years ago. I came across a model that I saw doing some studies. It's a visual model for me. I use it from time to time. I'm well aware of it. I know what it is. It's got a whole lot of categories in there, from eating well most of the time, your sleep, your disconnect, how you do that. But also there's a part in there for me around when something's really troubling you, how you might go about resolving that, and what you can do around that. A big part of it for me is exercise. I know it works for me. I still run 3 or 4 times a week. I'm very active. So COVID, for example, 2 years as the State Police Commander took its toll. I had a couple of periods with 3 months without a day off, and they were long, long days. I wouldn't have been able to do what I did if I wasn't running. And in fact, to such a degree that I started running 5 and 6 times a week because I knew I needed to. I knew I could disconnect in my running. I find I might work 14 hours a day, but I'll still fit my exercise in because I know how important it is for me in my leadership role. So I strongly recommend for anyone actually have a plan around your own health, safety, and well-being. I just find it's critical.
Yeah, it's a great point. And I think what we really want to get to today is one of the challenges of disasters when they occur is that response that we all sort of move into a mode that we have to sacrifice everything for the greater good, which is a noble and great trait to have. I'll be interested in your take on that and how you actually manage your plan when you are deployed away or out of that comfort zone. I'm a little concerned we might have just lost Rick for a minute.
Yeah, so now I'm back. I just locked me out for a moment. So my sincere apologies about that. I'm not sure what happened.
That's okay. It's yeah, there we go. Back on. Yeah. So sorry, just to recap, how do you use that plan in different environments? So when we're in disaster, obviously we're away from our normal resources. How do we adapt to that? And just that notion of the initial response, like when we turn out that need to sort of put everything else aside and jump into it. Do you have a view on how you can manage that?
I do, Tim, and there's a couple of components to that. One is as the responder, so one of the workers, I'll call them, that not necessarily in your management leadership role, sole worker. It really the first thing from the worker's perspective is understanding that when it's a significant emergency that you're deploying to, not something you respond to as a paramedic day to day or police, that you're actually deployed to go somewhere else. The first thing I'll say is it's never perfect when you first deploy. It's going to be quite hectic. So it really is about identifying what the opportunities are to actually inform the managers, the whatever, of what changes might be needed. But also you've got to go with it a bit in the first 24, 48 hours until that response becomes rather normalised. What is critical for managers, though, is converting urgent to what I call BAU. So very quickly, getting the people you need in the incident control centres and the relevant management centres, depending on what you're doing, to actually ensure that the planning is appropriate, that you've got your logistics that are necessary, that support your employees. So part of that is critical, and I'm very, very strong on this, the need for a fatigue management plan. You can't have people post 24, 48 hours doing extremely lengthy periods of time because fatigue over time causes a significant amount of stress on the body. So it really is about getting that right. If you don't get it right in the incident level, both regional, state and local, you won't get it right for your people. Another element of that is, so your fatigue management plan is in place, that you're not doing an enormous amount of hours, still disconnect. So even during the Black Summer fires, I still went for a run. It might be very early in the morning or it might be late at night. I maximize my time to do it because I know how important it is. The other element is appropriate inductions that also focus on the health, safety and well-being of our employees, all employees that have responded, and ensuring that appropriate things are put in place to support them. That you're connecting with your people, that you get to know your people, because part of the challenge is you won't know many of these people. So what sort of teams do you have that approach that? But also, and they're doing it more and more now, like some health checks that occur on the ground. So at police stations or at staging areas, there's health checks for our people as well. So it's all of those sorts of things make a big difference for our people. Just because you're going to emergency, you shouldn't be expected right from the outset to do these very lengthy days for a long period of time.
Yeah, it's a great point. You touched on an area there around managers and supervisors and the importance of managers and supervisors, particularly in those disaster sort of type deployments, as we're talking about, away from their normal resources. What do you see as the really key points that from a senior leader's perspective, what are you expecting of your managers to deliver on the ground?
So, well, the first part for managers is actually having sufficient people in all of your cells that actually enable you to be effective and doing it in a sort of a business as usual function. And when you see it, it's very clear. It is calm. It is well organized, well structured, and that delivers good outcomes for your people. So the first thing is getting your systems and processes right, but actually understanding what your role is. The other really important part is actually being a visible leader, being an active leader. You don't just sit in the function in the center and be advised that everything's good and great for our people. You need to get out. You need to see it, and you need to talk to your people. And I had this during the Black Summer fires up in a particular spot up in the northeast. And very quickly I saw they didn't have it right for some of our people. The systems and processes weren't right. And as a result, you had people spending lengthy time, I mean, very long hours out on the ground, whether it's at traffic management points or at the incident control center, wherever it is. So you've actually got to go out and have a look and see, but also listen to your people. You've got to listen to your people and then get to know your people that are there, and then provide opportunities for them to check in as well, because you can find just because you're away doesn't mean that people won't be struggling or might not be having trouble coping with a certain aspect of whatever the emergencies. They might have seen something, experienced something, whatever. So it really is actually having pathways from which they can share that and actually get some support and assistance, whether it's peer support, whether it's local welfare people that deploy and go forward. That's what I've had in the past. Our welfare team from Victoria Police have deployed and gone forward. Psychologists have been forward, walk the room, actively listen, and then identify opportunities. You can generally come across them and see them.
One of the key points around that, I guess, is that we do know from the research and from the data that there is a percentage of members who simply won't trust or have a stigma against reaching out to services within their own agency. And I think there's also with disasters this perception that everyone who turns out for a disaster is in a great place and they're all healthy and well and they don't have any other pressures going on in their life. Again, from that on the ground leader perspective, how would you deal with some of those sort of matters around, that really difficult member who you can probably see struggling but just doesn't want to reach out to what's available?
Yeah, and it's a really good question. So first thing I've learned over time, everybody's different. Everybody is different. Everybody copes differently, reacts differently, and some will reach out for help, some won't reach out for help. When I first joined policing 100 years ago, after a critical incident, it was common that everyone just went to the pub and you had a few beers and you had a laugh about what it was and you went home and everyone's fixed. It's all fine. Now that can work for some. Longer term, it's not healthy. So everybody's different. So the first thing I say is you've got to have multiple ways in which people can get some support and assistance. And I touched on it briefly. Peer support officers walking around, your welfare team walking around, knowing who your EAP providers are, having sort of the phone numbers in your induction package, including all of this. Some people will go to the union. Great. Some people don't trust their own EAP and want to use a union or an association's EAP. Fantastic. Give all the numbers there. Some will talk to a colleague. Generally, my experience is they'll flag it a little bit. They'll test the water a little bit with a colleague, a manager or whatever. Don't ignore those little signs. Really explore those, because if you're a person who is a trusted leader and a trusted manager, and you actually provide the opportunity, people will open up. And then it's about who do I best put that person in touch with to support them. Might be their local doctor. It might be a psychologist. It might be EAP. There's got to be multiple ways in which people get that help.
Yeah, and it is a great point that, sometimes it's really hard to get the courage to put your hand up. And if you approach a leader and you're rebuffed or don't sort of get that listening and respect that you're after, it can set people back a long way. So it's a really relevant point. We all know emergency services work is difficult, but it also has great rewards. There's a reason why people are involved in that industry, and I'd really just ask you if you would like to comment on that. I think that sometimes it's we have this impression that everyone who does it will be injured, and the risk is too great. I'd just love your impression on that.
Yeah, it's an interesting one. People on the ground, in all sorts of agencies, when there's a threat, when there's an emergency, um, people are running away from it. The emergency service workers go towards it. Right, their job, whether it's putting out a fire, whatever, their job is to protect the community, and in those roles, you are less risk averse than you would be as a person in another role that's not into emergency services. Um, at times we need to be brave, and that's what actually the community expects from us. We put ourselves in harm's way, but you risk assess it, and you rely on your training, whatever your agency is and your organisation is. You rely on that training. But at the same time, there is danger, but our roles, emergency service roles, are enormously fulfilling. You are in some of the few jobs where you protect the many, and you can make such a difference in people's lives. And that's what inspires most of us. That's what has most of us keep doing what we do over the years. And I say we, previous roles on the ground. I don't do that so much. Yes, I go out and about, but I'm in more a leadership management role. So I'm not sitting here saying I'm out there, putting myself in harm's way anymore, but I have done. And our people will continue to do it. And I often say, we're privileged. We're so fortunate that you actually can make such a difference in people's lives. And sometimes you're only one person in the world that's doing a job, but in a person's time of need, you are their world. Whether it's getting them out of a burning house or intervening or whatever it is, it means everything to them. And that satisfaction that it gives you, for me, outweighs all of the negative aspects of what emergency service employees do.
Yeah, very well said. And I think the real takeaway for me for that is that, it is a great career. It has great rewards. There is some risk involved, but if we plan well, if we have a mental health plan, if we know what our strengths are and can work to those, that's a career that can be enjoyed. Rick, thanks very much for that conversation. I think you've touched on so many really great and valid points and some really great insights. I might just introduce a panel now, and we'll continue the conversation. First up, I'll just share my screen again. And first up, I'll introduce Jane Nursey, who I've mentioned. Jane has 30 years experience in the public hospital and not-for-profit sectors. She's worked in both acute and mental health services, clinically assessing and treating people across a range of trauma-related mental health disorders, including high-risk industry groups like emergency services. Following the 2009 bushfires, Jane co-led the development and implementation of a statewide clinical service for bushfire-affected communities at the Austin Hospital PTRS. In a role at Phoenix, Jane has led and contributed to a range of service development and training and research projects that focus on translating evidence into practice, improving community and industry knowledge and capacity to manage the impact of traumatic events. On a personal level, Jane was intrinsic in the development of what was the Blue Hub project and the Blue Hub service. It's still available now, and continually to be heavily involved in Responder Assist. And I have the great pleasure of being able to work closely with her, and can't speak highly enough of her skills. And we'll ask Jane some questions in a moment. The last panelist is Trevor Owen from the CFA. Trevor first signed up as a volunteer with his local fire brigade in East Gippsland when he was just 12. Which the beginning of a long and successful career with the CFA. He served as a junior and senior volunteer prior to commencing his career, and over the last 2 decades has advanced from a firefighter all the way through the ranks to a deputy chief officer. So he brings great experience of that on the ground sort of background that we're really trying to dig into today. He's well recognised for his operational leadership by the Victorian Bushfires Royal Commission into the February 2009 bushfires, and has extensive experience having served as a volunteer at the CFA in Gippsland, Northeast Victoria and the Southeast. He has more than 25 years experience in fire and emergency management with proven performance in the fire and emergency management strategies and practices. He's worked in a range of senior roles and was appointed a assistant chief officer role for CFA's Southeast region, covering southern metropolitan Melbourne through to Mallacoota. So right in the middle of the mix, if you like. 222 brigades and 10,000 volunteers and staff. So welcome, Jane and Trevor. And we might start with you, Jane. Firstly, as we've outlined, you've got a great clinical background there and a great clinical history. But what does the research tell us about emergency service workers and their response in the disaster setting?
Well, look, I think I have to say that I think Rick has summarised beautifully what the research says, really. You know, the reality is that, you know, emergency service workers go into a disaster setting, and it's a different working environment to what it normally is for them. It's not the business as usual day-to-day work. It is a new environment that requires prolonged stamina and a prolonged approach, and you know, weeks and months sometimes of ongoing work. And the approach needs to be different. You know, they need to be working with other agencies in a much more collaborative way than they might usually. They need to be responding to the community and engaging with the community potentially a bit differently to how they have responded before. And there's a rapid changing environment. The other thing that's going to be different is that it might be that they're working in a home environment that is now impacted terribly by disaster, and that might be impacting their own families, it might be impacting their own home. And so there's a whole lot of additional stresses that come from working in that sort of environment. Might be that they see colleagues get harmed much more than they would in their normal operational work. And so there's a need really to be much more aware of what those impacts are going to be on them, both from a physical, behavioural, emotional and psychological level. And I think the research over the last 20 years of you know, the disaster research over the last 20 years has come a long way in terms of helping communities and organisations recognise those risks and understand those risks much more. And we've begun to develop frameworks that say this is how you prepare yourself for living and working in a disaster zone. And these are the sorts of things that you as an organisation, the emergency service workers need to do, but also as individuals. And part of that is being well informed. Understand what are the stresses and the risks associated with working in a disaster environment. How do those impact me as an individual? How do they impact my colleagues? How do they impact the work of the organisation? And how do they impact potentially my family? And once they understand those impacts, also understand what are the supports available to help manage those. And that includes taking some self-responsibility for skilling themselves up in, you know, emotional regulation skills, relaxation skills, having a plan, as Rick talked about. You know, he was 20 years ahead of his time, having a self-care plan 20 years ago that said, you know, this is how I'm going to keep myself mentally and physically well, both before a major event, stuff that I can do during the event that's going to help me manage my reactions, and also a routine that I can engage in after the event that's going to help calm everything down and get things back in track.
Fantastic. And that leads nicely into our next question for you, Trevor. Jane's given some really great insights there as to what, you know, a difficult job, and we expect a lot of our members, and we want them to be educated and planned. Your career spanned much involvement with volunteers and being a volunteer yourself. Just from that perspective, how does that sit? How does that, you know, people from all different walks of life coming together with a common theme? Just be really interested in your take on how we can instill some of those skills that Jane spoke of into that volunteer environment.
Yeah, like you said, Tim, you know, we have in a volunteer setting, we take everybody, you know, in our case, no different to any other volunteer organisation, anybody from the community that's willing to help. And we fit them into the role, in our case, to be a firefighter. So that involves everything from farmers, you know, tradies, professional activities in terms of being solicitors, lawyers, You know, you name it, we take all walks of life, and then they come with all different backgrounds, educational levels, financial statuses, and so forth, and we bring them together and they respond together. So one of the benefits from a volunteer organisation, though, is that you get a mixture of community together, people that have different skills, different life experiences, and they all bring something to the table. And often we draw upon that skill set to be able to enable us to work together for what we do best in responding to the community in times of need. That brings with it some real challenges, though, because you're taking local volunteer interest from a community, and particularly for those small communities, you know one another. You know, you respond to a call and you might find yourself in a situation where it's somebody from your local community. And that's the real challenge, particularly in some of our rural areas. So, you know, the mental health aspects of that and making sure that we're looking out for one another in some of those remote areas, even where some of those services aren't necessarily always available as well, as we find in some of the more larger, you know, city areas and so forth. So we're looking at in a volunteer workforce, it's a different demographic, it's a different need to come together, and we've got to motivate, inspire, encourage, and support people that are busy in both their professional lives. You know, farming, you're busy, you're doing stuff all the time in their long days, but then you've got to come and at times drop what you're doing, respond to the community and emergency. And what we've got to do is capture them as well when they go to some of those emergencies that are incredibly challenging, because they'll just go back straight away into their mainstream work, back into their private lives, etc. So volunteering is a challenge. You know, we think of a paid professional employee, come together, that's your single focus. You've got a whole lot of other support mechanisms that come around that as an employer-employee relationship. But in a volunteer setting, it's quite different, where it's coming together and you're doing it both as a hobby, you're doing it to support your community, and as another outlet to helping others.
Yeah, it's a great summary, Trevor. I think that notion that they are volunteers and there is considerable risk in that, and how do we really encourage them to understand that risk and plan ahead, as we've mentioned, and have good pathways to care. Rick, I might just quickly go to a topic we touched on in a previous discussion, and that's around the sort of impact of different traumas on different staff over a period of time. And, you know, you mentioned before about knowing your staff. Just wondered if you had any strategies in your role or in previous roles about how we can look at other ways of trying to perhaps minimise some of the impact of cumulative trauma on staff from an emergency management perspective.
Yeah, thanks, Tim. So I briefly touched on it before, and it is challenging depending on what emergency service organisation you are with and whether or not there are volunteers, how well you know your people. So the first thing I say is invest in your time and effort to get to know your people. You've got to build trusted relationships. And whether you're at a CFA brigade at Yellingbo or at a police station somewhere, you know, or part of your paramedic team, you've got to. I sort of learned this as a supervisor and a manager. I probably wasn't that good at it early. I was very much, you know, sort of the policies are there, you know, it's one shoe fits all sort of approach. But it didn't take me long to realise that I didn't really gain the trust of everybody, because everybody's different. And so it is really getting to know and actually investing time and effort in doing so. And then it is, when you've got that, you find so much more is shared with you. And colleagues will even share where they believe another colleague is struggling, because so many people won't talk about it. And so they will share. And then it's how you deal with that in a confidential setting and look for ways in which you might be able to get the support for that particular person. You can't just walk up with the person and say, you know, oh, Bill told me that, Tim, you're struggling a bit, mate. You know, what's going on? It just doesn't work like that. So it is ways in which you look to get that support and the trusted people around them. Can't always do it. Some people keep it to themselves, and it's very difficult, but it is building that trust.
Yeah, and I think that's the great aspect of this conversation is that the more acknowledgement we get, we need to build trust and create those pathways. We may not catch everyone, but we can certainly increase the number of people that are coming through. Jane, I just want to ask you quickly, a topic that comes up regularly, and we've talked a lot about having a plan and reaching out and so on. A topic that comes up is about operational debriefing. So, you know, these members are turning out, they're really big incidents. There's often not a lot of time for that. From a clinical perspective, where do we sit with that sort of notion at the moment, and what sort of best practice around operational debriefing in a psychological sense, I guess?
Yeah, well, I think it's actually really important to distinguish between what might be operational debriefing and psychological debriefing, because they're two very different things. You know, in years gone by, the recommended approach to supporting people following a traumatic incident or a disaster was something called critical incident debriefing or debriefing, which was the idea that if you can get in quickly and allow people to vent and talk through what the experience was like for them, then that's going to minimise the longer term impacts and potentially prevent something like PTSD developing. The research over recent years is really debunking that and is suggesting that that's not the best approach at all, that in fact that can be harmful to people, particularly if they're put into a group situation and forced to say, this is how I'm feeling and this is what happened to me. That can actually be quite traumatizing in and of itself. So we've moved away from the psychological debriefing to more sort of universal approaches that are being about looking after their psychological well-being, really, and psychosocial well-being. So it's about, you know, checking in with them, knowing the people, checking in with them, seeing if there's anything that you can do to help them, perhaps helping them to calm down, removing them from harm, and educating them about what to expect in terms of the coming days and weeks and months about how it might impact on them, developing their skills to help manage the emotional reaction. Operational debriefing is a very different thing, and that's something that is absolutely vital to effective workforce. Really, you know, you need to learn from major incidences, how well they were managed, what went wrong, what went right, what can we do better next time, what can be different. I think what's important in that operational debriefing, though, is that there is no blame. There is no blame of any individual. There's no, you know, punishment or condemnation. There's a very logical approach to, this is how we managed it. This is what worked well. This is what didn't work well. This is what we need to do next time. So it's an evaluative process.
Yeah, it's interesting the number of members who actually get quite stressed, if you like, or concerned about they may have done something wrong, and then to find out only that if they had have gone to the debrief and listened, it wasn't their fault at all, but a lot of guilt hangs around.
Well, Trevor, I think that's an important thing about trauma, that often we only have one aspect of it. It's only our experience, and there's a whole lot of other stuff that's gone on. It's not just our responsibility.
Trevor, the longer I listen to this, the more unenviable I think your position is. One of the important things we read about disaster is that sense of community afterwards, and that ability to have more than just yourself and have outside interests and other things you can go to. Again, in our discussion earlier in the week, it was raised about your volunteers, and you mentioned before farmers and the difficulty you have having a line of sight on some of those people. They mightn't go to another incident for a period of time. Would you like to elaborate on that a little bit more, and perhaps some strategies that we might be able to think about how we can keep a more closer focus on our people?
Yeah, so we do a lot of checking in. And that can even be done online, like in these type of forums as well. It can be about just picking up the phone and having a conversation. So, we have a lot of our managers, even at the front sort of facing level, with our district levels, making contact on a regular basis through captains of the brigades. They're checking on their members. They come together periodically, do their training together, and anything that they don't see as right, or that might be just not looking right, we intervene and we ask those questions, we get to the point of, you okay, is everything all right? And if they need to be referred on, we've got access to a member assistance program, and they can choose to do that themselves. When they feel free to do that themselves, we can help intervene if we need to support them and steer them in that direction. So it really is about the check-in, and it's about picking up on those signs and symptoms. We also talk within the families, because often, it's your partner that realises something's not quite right, and they bring it to our attention. So they also, we're required, they'll talk to the captain of the brigade or talk to an officer of the brigade and say, have those conversations if they think that people and their particular partner isn't travelling okay, and you then engage with them and have those conversations and again offer those services that get in and around them when required. But farmers are an interesting one too, because often they're the type of, they do it hard on the farm. They're so, hard working and proud of what they do. And often they're the ones that are the last to come and ask for help. So we really, really try to invest where we can with them and support them and again, get in around them and pick up on any of those signs and symptoms that things just may not be quite right. And sometimes that's difficult with people that are quite proud on the land.
Yeah, I think it's a great sort of observation that we, things like today and spreading that message that each individual does need to have that plan. As robust and tough and as determined as we might be, it's too late to try and make that plan when we're in crisis. So really getting on that front foot and trying to get people to think about mental health differently. They have enough challenges as it is without putting them into a disaster context.
Can I just add something in there too? Because I think
Jane.
one of the things is that often, particularly in emergency service organisations where they are putting themselves on the line every day, they're putting their lives on the line every day, and there's an expectation that goes along with that they will get looked after in return for doing that. And therefore there can be an unwillingness, I guess, to be active in seeking support and looking after themselves because, somebody else needs to do that for me because I've done this for everyone else. I think it's really important that at an organisation, and this is what the research will tell us, organisations need really good mental health frameworks that give pathways into care and at a stepped care level, depending on what was needed. But it's just equally as important that the individuals take some responsibility for their own mental health and well-being and have their own plan in place as well. Yeah,
the old saying of they broke me, they can fix me doesn't help anyone. Waiting for help to come to you generally doesn't end well. So, and
it's not universal. But
no, it is a cohort. I was going to now just move over to answer some of the questions, and I've sort of framed them into topics that I won't go to specific questions, but maybe I'll approach it a little bit differently because I think we've covered a lot of the areas that were in the themes. But one question I would love to ask you, Trevor, is if you could go back now into your, when early volunteer days, and you're a captain at a local station. Well, what advice would you give Trevor from, however many years ago now that perhaps he could do things differently or improve outcomes?
I think the thing that I've learned out of my journey is that our organisation, like many emergency services, it's people that put fires out. It's not the equipment. You need good people and you need to look after your people. And it's not always the physical bit, it is the mental health aspect. So, as we've been discussing tonight, having those plans, checking in regularly, seeking the support when we need to. But it really is about fostering that the relationship, that trusted relationship with your people and building that rapport and that confidence that when they need to, they can come forward and know that they're going to get the necessary support in and around them. And that whilst we're all proud of what we do, again, seeking that support when we need it and doing that as early as we can is critically important. So for me, people are first. We're a people-based organisation, as many emergency services are. The most critical asset to any organisation is its people. So as leaders, it's absolutely essential that we're looking after and doing everything we can for our people. And it's not just the sprains, strains and falls and, those type of things that we often see in our case, fire grounds. It is about looking after the mental health of our people, first and foremost.
I think it's commonly accepted that over the last 10 years, the access to services, mental health services in the agencies has improved considerably to in my view, the point that, if someone puts their hand up, they'll get help. It may not be always the most appropriate help, but they will get a pathway to get assistance. Rick, if we were to take you back to the shiny days at St Kilda or one of those stations you're at, how would you reflect on your role back then, and what advice would you give to managers out or leaders out there now who might be undertaking, who knows what can happen the next few weeks where something major may happen? How would you have them prepare?
It's a really good question, and a lot of what Trevor touched on there is right. It's the trusted relationships, but it's interesting. If knowing what I know now, I would have had a health, safety, wellbeing plan right from the start. I would have loved to have known a bit about this when I was in the police academy. The other, in terms of leadership, is I had a work colleague who took his own life because of what was occurring in the workplace. And I think the leaders had no idea that they'd created that environment that caused him the distress that it caused him. He didn't share enough about what he was going through. I knew he was struggling with some stuff. I had no idea it had got to that point. So, I think in some ways I ended up in more senior levels because I wanted to make a difference, to make sure no workplace I ever worked at was going to have those sorts of behaviours there. The other is, I didn't know what stress can do to your body. I had no idea, and I've learnt over time talking to people who ended up being diagnosed with PTSD, who said, I never ever thought that would happen to me. The amount of people that have said, I never thought that would happen to me, and they actually had no idea for a number of years that that's what it was. They didn't really know what was wrong with them. So I think for all of us to know what it can actually do to your body and your mind is just so important, because then once you know that, you can then do something about that. And it is, and Trevor touched on this as well, it's not just at the end of the shift, how are you going, or the next shift, how are you going. I've learned from my more senior roles that checking in with people a couple of days later with just a telephone call, whether they're on a day off or whatever, goes a long, long way to building trust and to having people open up. And I did it regularly in my other role, where you would have police members who were seriously injured, life and death type situation, shot at or whatever, that I would call a couple of days later, and they would open up to someone they'd never even met. The person worked at Mildura or 12,000 staff, and then would then open the door to what support they might need as well. So understanding that, knowing who to speak to, knowing it, and it's not just, so my plan has multiple people that I can reach out to depending on what I'm experiencing. And I reached out to someone a few weeks ago. So no matter what level you're at, sometimes just to talk some things through. Now, it might be a management challenge, it might be conflict in the workplace, whatever, but have a plan so you can activate that. And there's different ways. You've got to have time out. So one of the best ways I shut off from work at the end of the day is I listen to an audio book from the moment I get in the car to drive home. And I know from the moment I get home and get out of the car and walk in the house, I'm completely disconnected from work. It works for me. Others, it might be Pilates or yoga or whatever sport they might play. So it's probably it from me. And as a sergeant, if you say go back to being a sergeant back then, a first level supervisor, it is truly getting to know your people and building that trust, which Trevor touched on as well.
Thanks, Rick. Jane, just finally back to you. There was a number of the questions related around, what training can we do if I'm a manager, or if I'm a emergency service worker, I'm trying to prepare, do the right thing, get ready for this disaster season that's coming up. What training can I do from a psychological perspective to prepare myself for that?
So I think that there are a number of trainings you can do through different agencies for things like what we might call psychological first aid or psychosocial support programs that just give you a good understanding about trauma and its impacts, and then the simple things that you can do to manage those immediate reactions. At a larger organisational there's things like trauma-informed care that really gives the leaders in the organisation, but also staff in the organisation, a good understanding about how do you work with people who've been traumatised? How are you sensitive to what they might be going through, and look out for signs? Things about like mental health literacy is really important, I think, as well. But I think the other thing is just reading up yourself on understanding the impacts of trauma. There's lots of information out there. Phoenix Australia has a lot of information on its website, but there's other sources of information. Red Cross as well have a lot of information. So reading up, developing a self-care plan and learning how to do that and putting that in place is really important. We know that whilst everyone is going to react in some way to a traumatic experience, whether it be physical, emotional, psychological, or whatever, for the majority of people, that's going to resolve over a brief period of time. It might be weeks, it might be some months, but for the majority of people, it will resolve as long as you've got support around you, good social support around you, and as long as you're taking care of yourself and using those resilience skills. But for some, mental health disorders do eventuate, and there are different risk factors for that. So just becoming, reading up on the information about trauma and its impacts on mind and body is really important, and those two are well connected.
Yeah, I think that just the other point on that is simply by being in the service of emergency service work, there will be a cumulative effect that, having a plan is great, but, you're going to be exposed a number of times. So really planning for that and being aware of that. Unfortunately, we're coming to an end of our time, and I really appreciate what was a really rich discussion. I'm sure we could have talked for much, much longer. Before we finish up, thank you, Jane. Trevor, any final words of wisdom for us as we move into the last phase?
I think from my point of view, look after yourself first, because then you've got to be able to look after others. So that incredible importance about knowing yourself well enough, because as leaders, it's we're leading people, and we've got to be really self-conscious of our own mental health. So having that plan, as Rick has said, and Jane, and focusing on yourself is really critically important.
Fantastic. Really appreciate your contribution. And Rick, final word?
Oh, no, I think, as you said, you could talk forever about this, and you never stop learning. So I think just from my perspective, I just want to thank all of the people online. I don't know who they are, but if they're in emergency service organisations or enablers of emergency services or supporting people who are whatever, thank you so much for what you do. And a special thanks to families, because I sort of haven't touched enough on how vital families are, partners, loved ones, for our people who do experience trauma and stress, and that cumulative stress as well that you touched on. So they are vital, and they're often the ones that reach out in the first place to managers and leaders and the organisations as well. So I just want to say thanks to them.
Excellent. Again, thank you all for your contribution. And I know it took a bit of to give up your time this evening for this. It's really appreciated, and I'm sure plenty of people got some great insights from your expert advice. So thank you. I'll just move on to our last section now, and Anita Savic, who's a senior clinical specialist at Phoenix Australia, is going to join us. Anita, firstly, welcome.
Thank you, Tim.
Responder Assist, one of the projects that we work on together, which is fantastic. Just wonder if you could give us a bit of an overview of some of the services that are available in Responder Assist and how they relate to that conversation we've just had.
Thanks, Tim. Also wanted to just thank the panel for such a valuable conversation with some really great questions and insights shared. Responder Assist, and you can actually access the Responder Assist website now via the QR code that's up on your screen. So if you bring that up, you can have a look at what's available as I'm talking you through. Responder Assist offers a referral pathway for emergency workers who need psychological treatment, and it's available for both current and former emergency service workers. So as we heard from the panel, It's important for leaders and managers to be aware of what options are available, and this is certainly one good option for some members. So if your work has affected your psychological health and well-being, or you're bothered by mental health symptoms at work, or if you're a leader or a colleague and want to support someone to refer them for treatment, you can contact us for confidential and independent assessment. And the number is 1-800-329-191, and we're available Monday to Friday during business hours. So as Jane mentioned, we offer evidence-based treatment for people who are experiencing trauma and other mental health symptoms. Now, Responder Assist also offers information and resources for mental health professionals who treat emergency workers, with a range of trainings and supports available for clinicians, including specialist training on things such as trauma-informed self-care and trauma-focused cognitive behavioural therapy. And we also offer a range of podcasts on the website. You'll also find the Ready to Respond template on the website, and we encourage you to share this with your people. We heard from the panel about the importance of having a self-care plan, and this provides a really nice and easy to use template to help people develop a self-care plan. As Tim mentioned at the start, you can also access training, information and resources through the Disaster Mental Health Hub on the Phoenix Australia website. And we'll be providing you with the links to all of these resources in an email that will follow after today. Now, there should be a link in the chat function coming up for you to provide feedback for us. So if you could take a moment to complete this, it will really help guide us and inform our future webinars for 2024. Hard to believe we're almost at the end of the year. So that's a bit about Responder Assist, Tim. People are, of course, welcome to reach out and get in touch with us if they have any questions about the various support options that are available to them. Thank you.
Thanks, Anita. And before I take that slide down, that those that know me, those that know me will know that that's my pet topic, if you like. Everyone needs to have a plan. Make the plan, know the plan, revise it. If it's not working, change it up and find something that will work. Can't thank our panel enough for sharing their time with us tonight. It's been a really rich and valuable conversation. I think it's allowed us to explore some of those areas around emergency service work in the disaster context, and that deployment away into those difficult areas. One of the real takeaways for me has been that, you know, across that whole range of panelists we had, that it is a shared responsibility. The agencies do a lot of work in trying to provide resources for people and access to pathways to care so they can get treatment if they're impacted by a mental health condition. But there's also that responsibility on individuals to understand themselves, understand their own mental health, and choose their own pathway to care. It may or may not be through an agency, but the real message is that you do need somewhere to go and a clear pathway to get there, and not try and make that plan once you're already in crisis. So getting in early. We can plan for disasters. We know when we turn out, as Rick pointed out, that it's not going to be perfect. The first few days are going to be difficult. No two disasters are the same. The level of planning that goes into some of these things, and then, you know, the first few days are a bit of a mess, that quite understandably, given the different nature of each different disaster that might happen, a bushfire or a flood or whatever the case may be. But from Phoenix Australia and from Responder Assist particularly, we'd love to thank you for your viewing this tonight. We again thank to our panel members who gave a rich discussion. I really encourage you to complete that feedback form. We are considering some more of these down the track, so it will be great to hear from you all. Right on 7 o'clock, perfect timing. Thanks again for your time, and hopefully we'll speak soon.